Aidan, have you ever spent literal years piecing together everything you know about an upcoming Nintendo console, desperately hoping it's going to be awesome, but scared it's going to suck?
I mean, the first thing I did, and all I could think about after I got my Game Boy was how amazing it would be to strap two Game Boys like an inch and a half from my eyeballs. So I'd
Yeah,
get 3D Game Boy games. And, well, I mean, we know how that turned out.
we sure did. Me? No, I've never, ever spent years and years wondering what the new Nintendo console is going to look like. I can't imagine scouring the internet for rumors or reports or factory SKUs or retailer shelves or secret pictures with stuff blurred out and people arguing over whether it's AI generated or not or You've got Fun Factor, two old gamers reviewing old video game magazine reviews. I'm Ty Shalter, he's Aidan Moher, and we're two professional writers who grew up loving the video games and video game magazines of the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s. Every episode, we take a critical look back on the games media that, for better and for worse, inspired us to do what we do. First, go to funfactorpod.com and follow the show on your podcatcher of choice. Leave us a rating or review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your media. We'll read the best, kindest, funniest, and most insightful ones on the air in our letters section. Please consider becoming a member of Fun Factor ULTRA, our premium tiers that unlock ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, and the members-only channels of our Discord. Just go to funfactorpod.com and I promise you, you cannot miss it. Then, help us spread the word. Shout us out on Blue Sky at funfactorpod.com or anywhere else at funfactorpod. You know, Aidan, I thought we were done with hardware rumors for a while after one of the most drawn out, hyper anticipated, leaked ahead of time console launches, the Switch 2, actually happened. Little did I know that was just the beginning of that discourse cycle. But back in 1995, the only real source for gaming news were these professional monthly magazines with production pipelines that were themselves multiple months long. So, as we've talked about, it was possible for Sega to stealth launch the Saturn in the US with basically nobody having any idea that it happened. And yet, not only were hardware generations shortening, but there were about a rolling dozen or so game platforms. As new ones got launched, old ones died, and segments like PC and handheld took bigger and smaller shares of the gaming pie. Readers and journalists alike were all thrilled with the possibilities of the post 16-bit era. I mean, this magazine is called Next Generation. What do you remember about reading rumors of what these new consoles could and couldn't do?
It's April 2025. We're a couple of months out from the Switch 2 being released after, as you say, just a crazy period of leaks and rumors and, leading up to the reveal, like, days before, hours before, people were like, oh, I heard that Switch 2 doesn't even do 4K, like crazy stuff like that. The other day, like 2 days ago, I saw Switch 3 rumors already.
Great.
About chips that they've signed, contracts they've signed with whoever, Nvidia, I think it was, for the chip for the Switch 3. And so we're at a point where going back in time with these magazines, there was only so much space. They kind of had to vet rumors and stuff as well, right? There was no avenue to be like, hey, we hear, Nvidia signed a contract for this little tiny chip or whatever. You kind of had to weigh, do we have enough here to use up, a column or a page or a half page or a quarter page on this rumor section. But rumors abounded. We were doing PSM #1 in our very first episode, and in there they were talking about rumors about the PlayStation 2.
Yes.
And so that cycle of always drumming up the idea that what you have is cool. Be excited about this, but we're also working on the next thing, or they're also working on the next thing, has always been so central to video games in that console space, because these technologies take so long to develop, to create, to conceptualize, but also to nail down on all the contracts. And so a big one from back in the day, sort of just before this era, was the Nintendo PlayStation, right? Yes. And we would hear so much about the CD-based add-on for the Super Nintendo, which of course was created by Sony. It exists. There's one or two out there. that physically exist, and it was the Nintendo PlayStation. And then, of course, there was that famous falling out between Sony and Nintendo. Nintendo sort of backstabbed Sony and went with Philips, and like it obviously just didn't work out. But the idea that you had this Super Nintendo that, you know, was going to kind of fix its biggest flaw, which was like cartridge size and the cost of cartridges, by aligning with Sony, was just tantalizing, right? And we know, we can look back now that, you know, there were games like Secret of Mana that were meant to be on CD. And so they have a bunch of cut content that just never made it onto the cart. And seeing those like rumors in hindsight and saying, oh, you know what? Sometimes the rumors were sort of just rumor mongering. Just something to fill the, you know, the page, get people excited. Sometimes there was like a lot of truth in there as well. And it just speaks to how much happens in the industry behind closed doors that we just don't hear about, and how business deals impact so much of what's going on. Like, can we imagine what would have happened if that, you know, Nintendo PlayStation had materialized? Like gaming and the entire ecosystem would be so different now. And so kind of watching those and like thinking about them just from the perspective of a gamer, like, oh, I'm really excited because of these opportunities as like, how, you know, how could it allow people to make better games, was really exciting to me as a kid. Now I look back and I think about the business angles or the perspectives of the people involved, how precarious it all is as you have these huge companies trying to make decisions together. That part of it's really fascinating to me. And so I think about, like, you know, rumors about Switch 3 now, or you hear about Microsoft leaving the game console business or launching, you know, we always hear about handhelds because of the Steam Deck and the Switch being so successful. Like, so Sony going to make a PSP 2 or a Vita 2 or whatever, or is Microsoft going to enter the handheld market? It never changes. It's all the same. It's all the same rumors. You know, something better is coming along the way, or somebody's going to have the Game Boy killer or the Steam Deck killer. And, you know, it's all... Nothing changes. Everything, you know, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
For sure. But I think this era had it different because there were so many makers jumping in. I have talked before on, you know, a couple podcasts about, it seemed like there's like a wheel, like at every CES and then eventually E3 also, where it would be like electronics company, toy company, and then like what, and it'd be like spin. Magnavox is pairing up with Whammo to make the Frisbeetron, you know, and they just show a bunch of stuff, and it's like, this is never going to come out. You know, there are so many consoles being announced and rumors, and actually this issue of Next Generation 5 has this big long section on the 3DO M2, which of course did not exist. This combination of real stuff and vaporware was and hype for both was wild. One rumor that stands out to me from this time is one that's repeated later in this issue, was repeated across multiple issues of Next Gen and other Imagine Media mags, some of the other gaming mags I saw. Nintendo was going to be aggressive in owning online play. I vividly remember this for years. People were saying, hey, Nintendo, they're the console maker who are by far the most interested in and hard at work on online play. Do you remember that?
I was deep into the computer, like PC online gaming. Like, I was playing a lot of Doom, Warcraft over like LAN and online and stuff. So I didn't really care about online console stuff. Like, that was not appealing to me at all.
See, I didn't get a computer in the house till I was 16. I didn't even get my mom to pay for internet service till I was 17. So I was like, online, oh my God, I gotta have online. And those in the know kept hinting. Nintendo being last to market might or might not put them behind in raw processing power, but Saturn and PlayStation would look like doorstops once Ultra 64's network capability and Nintendo's robust online strategy was revealed. I hung on to this cope for years, right? And it made sense at the time. We'll see the Satellaview for Super Nintendo, the Japan only satellite internet thingy, was about to launch in Japan. But not only did the N64 never get online, Nintendo stayed well behind Sega, Sony, and eventually Microsoft in both digital delivery and online play, and arguably remains so to this day. And now we're in this situation with rumors where the cycle is so fast, and we're alluding to, there are YouTube channels, journalists whose entire careers are built around hyperfixating on, you know, manufacturing details and these partner contracts we talk about that, you know, were barely even discussed back then. and trying to discern like what is the new thing going to be, like when is it coming. And it feels weird to me because with diminishing returns on graphics tech, it's not like the Switch 2 is going to absolutely blow everyone's mind. Like it's not like the PlayStation 6 is going to be something you could immediately spot. That's a PlayStation 6 game versus a PlayStation 5 game running over there, let alone the PlayStation 5 Pro that's in between, right? But yet there's so much more attention being paid to this. Does that strike you as odd?
I mean, yes and no. I think that, we've talked a lot about, like offline, about the digital foundry effect and how people are, like when the return on graphics is more about kind of subtle detail and overall like vibe, or technical performance than it was in previous generation leaps. Like you look at the Super Nintendo to the N64 or the N64 to the GameCube, like those were such obvious generational leaps. And that's still what people sort of want and expect, but that's not what we're getting anymore. It's iterative. It's more like horsepower. It's more like, ray tracing or path tracing or, upscaling, AI upscaling and stuff like that. I educate myself on that because I find it interesting. Nowadays we just get rumors every time there's a new console. PlayStation 5 Pro was coming out, or even the PlayStation 5, and now the Switch 2. It's like, oh yeah, like is this the point where we get locked 60 FPS in every game? And every new console that comes out is like, no. Like, because they're always going to kind of push graphical tech as far as they can get, and the mass market has accepted 30 FPS as like a standard that most people find fine. Mm-hmm. They're not going to push 60 FPS as a standard because that's just never how any business decision has ever been made. They're always going to push tech harder and harder, and yet these rumors every single console generation is this going to be when we get 60 FPS in every game just locked? I feel like there's a lot of dreaming in a lot of the rumors that kind of pop up, and a lot of speculation in terms of like not like actual rumors, but hey, this is what we kind of hope, and this is what we could see this tech being used for, which goes counter to the history of game development.
When Next Generation number 5 dropped, it felt like a generational leap in magazine technology, at least, for me, because this was the first one I saw. We will dig into that, open up the cover and everything inside when we get back. If you're not already a member of FunFactor ULTRA and getting ad-free episodes, just hang tight through the break. We'll get to Next Generation 5 right here on FunFactor. Welcome back to Fun Factor, where two old gamers review old video game magazine reviews. Of course, we want you to review us. Do we get a full 5.0 in Fun Factor? Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or a comment on YouTube, and we'll read the best, funniest, kindest, and most entertaining ones on the air. Aidan, back in our second episode, the one on Game Players number 75, you asked me if I had any core memories of game mags, and my response was the first time I saw an issue of Next Generation, and it was this issue, number 5, with this dark futuristic spaceship and a big teaser feature about Nintendo's upcoming Ultra 64, quote unquote. Next Generation was so much slicker and cooler than the other mags, with these cardstock covers that had like a satin finish overlay, really clean and modern design elements, and was obviously targeted at the small but growing, like mature, intelligent gamer demographic. And oh yeah, cover price $4.99 in both the US and Canada, which is about $10 in today's dollars. Now, you and I already talked about a different issue of Next Gen, as it would come to be called, in one of our quote unquote lost dry run episodes, but the good people still need to hear the info. So Imagine Media, which is now Future US, launched Next Generation in January 1995. It ran till January 2002. Something I didn't know until researching for this podcast. The company that had long published Game Players became Imagine Media when it was bought by the UK's Future Publications. So Next Gen actually shared editorial staffers, content, and a lot of design sensibility with the UK's Edge magazine, which at the time I did not know even existed. But here we have it, May 1995, the 5th issue of Next Gen's debut year, 111 pages plus a 2-page advertisement after that. 54 games reviewed for 10 different systems: PlayStation, 3DO, Jaguar, Sega 32X, Neo Geo, PC, Macintosh, Sega CD, Genesis, and SNES. And like for the rest of the magazine, no bylines. Anywhere in the magazine, the staff said early on that they wanted to collectively share credit and blame for everything published in the magazine. So outside of like the regular columns where like one author is specifically writing it, there's none of the content in the magazine is assigned to any one writer, and it's too bad because I'd like to talk to some of them about some of that.
Next Gen is a magazine I appreciate a lot more in hindsight than I did at the time. I was deep into, as we've talked about, Game Players and EGM, Game Pro, Game Fan, and I liked a lot of the like humor and sort of the like adolescent targeted writing in a lot of those magazines. Like I was the core audience for that stuff. And I honestly found Next Gen a little dry.
Sure.
Like I liked the personality driven stuff. And I think that's the defining feature that you just highlighted, that like those other magazines were starting to define the personality of the people who wrote them. And Next Gen took the exact opposite approach and just didn't really work for me specifically. But in hindsight, I think it was really bold to target that older audience, that more mature audience. That was, probably 5 years older than I was at the time, and looking for something that was a little bit more, adult driven. And I think that was smart, and I think it aged really well. Edge, I think, is one of the best gaming magazines of all time. I was not aware of it in the mid-90s either. But Next Gen really took that lead from the kind of North American perspective, I think. And I really like that it exists now, even if I didn't really appreciate it at the time.
I also liked some of the more juvenile stuff in Game Players. I liked their weird, letters to the editor and kind of collective fever dreams. But I also really felt like, ooh, yeah, I'm getting in with the grown-ups. I am a grown-up now. I'm cool. Made me feel cool for reading it. Made me feel smart for reading it. And looking back at it now, as we're about to flip through this, it feels like they're making a magazine for each other rather than a magazine for 14-year-olds, right? And we can say it hits and misses in various ways, but I really do appreciate this. Publisher Jonathan Simpson Bint, per his LinkedIn, came to the U.S. in 1993 as the first full-time sales employee of GP Publications, which was the original parent company of Game Players. Simpson Bint rose to the top, becoming president of Future US, then moved on to co-chair a Bay Area's Marketers Association. The most recent gig for him was being the chief revenue officer of some streaming video app called Twitch TV. Ever heard of that, Aidan?
I knew I recognized that name. I was just recently reading Nathan Grayson's book, Stream Big, which is all about the history of Twitch and the streamers who kind of helped create it. And yeah, that's interesting. There's always those connections. Like, people in this industry always seem to pop up. You think they disappear, you think they're gone, and then you realize, nope, they just kind of ended up elsewhere, usually on the other side of media. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole discussion for another episode, is the way that media is unable to retain people through their careers, even back in in the 90s, I guess. But
yeah, well, it looks like Jonathan Simpson Bint took his money and got out. He left Twitch in 2022. His LinkedIn now lists no current job or anyone after that. His bio starts with father, farmer, physicist, footballer, and refers to his former life as a revenue officer and in digital media. God bless you, Jonathan. Hope you are enjoying your physics and your football. Editor Neil West, according to the Magazines of the Past wiki, started at UK magazine Sega Power in 1990, became deputy editor. Then in 1992 was picked to be the launch editor of a Sega-centered magazine called Mega, presumably referring to the Sega Genesis's UK name of Mega Drive. In 1994, he moved to the US to launch and edit Next Generation, which he did till 1998. He edited Future US's Arcade magazine for a year, spent some time at some site called GarageBand.com, and for the last 16 years has been head of Apple Music's UK and Europe division from his home base in Madrid. Not bad.
Ty, I think I should have gotten to games journalism in the mid-90s. not not 2019. I think I might have missed the window here.
No doubt. Other Imagine Media regulars will pop up throughout Next Generation's run. I wanted to cite this one. We get a Trent Ward in here, who I suspect is the mysteriously mononymous Trent from Game Players number 75 from our second episode.
I mean, possibly. There are a lot of Gen Xers named Trent.
That's true.
It was quite a Gen X-y name, so we can't jump to too many conclusions.
All right, it is time for the flip through. First of all, I think the swing at Prestige magazine design just pops off the page from the very beginning. You know, we have this big graphic intro, a lot of sans serif fonts, clean design, mixed with solid color, subtle details here and there, boxes and lines. It really looks like you're taking a swing at grown-up design, making a magazine writers and editors in their mid-20s are trying to make for each other, to impress each other.
I honestly like looking at this magazine. I think it still looks good. Like a lot of these magazines from the mid-90s did not age well. I appreciate them, but they're not strong from like a design standpoint. Next Gen still looks good. What it really looks like is sort of like 2005 era EGM, which is wild because this is like 10 years earlier. And at that point, EGM was also trying to like market towards, an aging and maturing audience. They were getting a little bit, older. And I think it's interesting and, shows a lot of foresight that Next Gen like had this really clean design that holds up nicely, but also was a showcase of what other magazines were going to be doing literally a decade later.
We need to start where the issue starts, with a banger of an interview with Sony Computer Entertainment America CEO Steve Race. Again, we don't know who actually conducted this interview because of their no byline policy, but unlike the issue 2 months earlier, where Nolan Bushnell seemed not only to trample the interview, but warp all the features around it into an Atari is so back narrative, totally belied by facts and reality. The interviewer here is not afraid to push Race, and Race, to his credit, does not shy away. Next Gen started the interview asking why Sony didn't make a 16-bit console, and Race is frank about their failed attempt to collaborate with Nintendo, the one you referenced earlier. Aidan, can you read this follow-up exchange?
So Next Gen asks, but could Sony be too late? Many people argue that the 16-bit video game boom was just teenage fashion and that there may be no mainstream market for 32-bit game machines. Race replies, there are always those nagging doubts, especially when you're trying to make a buck the size that someone is making in this industry. However, if you go back and take a look, the video game industry has been around for well over a decade. Each generation of hardware tends to sell more and more units. We're talking now about 16-bit systems that have sold upward of 30 million units domestically in the United States. That's about 100% penetration of your cohort group. I don't think that that's a fad or a trend because the penetration is too deep. There's a famous quote by Charles Revlon, the cosmetics tycoon, who, upon being asked if he sold cosmetics, replied, "No, I sell hope." Similarly, I think that what we provide is entertainment value, and we do that in the form of video games. We measure ourselves in hardware and software, but really what we sell is the greater experience of entertainment. There's always a market for that.
First off, what an answer. But second, what a question. I can't imagine any other gaming mag in 1995 asking an executive like this a question like that. Like, again, the magazine is named for the excitement and potential of the 32-bit era, and the question is, what if it turns out the 16-bit era was just baby toys for little babies? And all this is for naught. I mean, I'm struggling to imagine a game journalist today sitting down with Hideaki Nishido, the new CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment, and asking whether they're going to bother making a PlayStation 6 since people think consoles are dead.
Yeah, I mean, two things. That could never happen because, like, it's so locked down by PR now, especially, like, the console stuff. But even like as I go around trying to get access to like smaller games and try to nail down interviews and stuff, I have trouble getting creators to talk on record because I just run into brick walls with PR. Or I've worked on features about Final Fantasy and they've been great and really encouraging, but all the questions get run through PR first. So I think that there was still sort of like an openness in the industry, and I think Sony wanting to really establish itself was maybe willing to be a little bit more open, a little bit more aggressive in their communication. And second of all, like, man, did this guy call his shot like Babe Ruth?
Whew.
Like, he was spot on. And then the PlayStation 2 went on to become the biggest, highest selling console of all time with way more than 30 million units. And so, like, I think, it was like he sat there and he said, no, like, this is how we're thinking about it. And that like, connection to the Revlon quote is just so good, because I think it is spot on that you need to recognize that, like, video games aren't competing just against themselves. They compete against television and film and movies and music and just going outside, right? Playing baseball with your friends or playing catch with your mom or your dad, right? Like it is entertainment and it competes against that. And as they position themselves in that regard, they were able to understand how to grow in that market. And that probably led to the PlayStation 2, including a DVD player, which was one of the huge selling points and allowed that market penetration. That was, like he says, like, when you have that deep market penetration, you have lasting appeal. And the DVD player, creating an all-in-one like entertainment unit that could play music, that could play movies, that could play video games, was so integral to its success. So I think, like, you could see the seeds of what Sony wanted to do and recognize that they were more than just a video game company. They were making more than just a video game device. They were creating an entertainment device.
Yeah, and the interview goes on like this. Next Gen pushes Race on price point, release date, Sony's place in the market, and Race offers surprisingly frank answers. The interviewer even challenges Race's statement that Sony's a creator-driven company by referring to George Michael's contract lawsuit against Sony Music. Just drops, George Michael would have something to say about that. Like, that is incredible, and I have such a hard time seeing that happening today.
Amazing stuff. Yeah, and I think, like, we would be in a better place if we had more open communication like this. And just, like, more freedom for the press to be covering games. Like, as we watch the games media sort of collapse, all of it's been taken over by PR and PR-approved outlets and influencers, and that's so that they can control the message and so they don't have to face hard questions. And I wish that there was a way that we could kind of roll things back where companies were more willing to, sit down and talk and have these sorts of interviews with, with journalists. We have a couple of people who can still nail down some pretty impressive interviews. Jason Schreier at Bloomberg can still get some pretty good, interviews and stuff like that. But it's just so much more rare now that you get open dialogue like this.
Coming from sports journalism, which is another entertainment industry where people take their secrets way too seriously, access helps, right? Because we're talking about the Nintendo Switch 2 launch. Them picking a price out of a hat and having people be furious is something where, hey, if a couple months ago you'd sat down with a journalist and they said, hey, so what are you thinking? $2.99, $3.99? Like, it might be $4.50. You could get a maybe it shouldn't be $4.50. You can get that like those sorts of things. Information can help you both ways, having access and transparency, and you have a chance to go, hey, well, here's why we did $4.50, instead of shutting out the public, shutting out the world, stealth dropping the info after your Nintendo Direct, and then being flummoxed and spending days taking L after L after L after L in public opinion because you didn't talk to people, you tried to make it secret. And so this is something I am absolutely hammering on video game companies for. And PR people tell me I'm wrong. I'm telling PR people you're wrong.
I mean, we're going to get to it in a moment, but there's another big feature in this issue about another game console that, sort of tried to just surprise everybody, and it didn't go very well.
Two huge stingers to this interview. Number one, a decade ago, actually 2014, Cyril Lachelle of defunctgames.com and Brad Galloway of gamecritics.com did a dramatic reenactment of this interview. It is still up online. I encourage you to check it out. And 2 months after a very successful launch of PlayStation in the US, Race abruptly resigned to take over Spectrum Holobyte, a mid-sized publisher best known for their military PC flight sims and console Star Trek adventure games. And then after merging it with Microprose and selling to Hasbro, Race seems to have become a corporate turnaround gun for hire. Since 2014, he's managed a hedge fund that specializes in turning around medium-sized companies. We could spend forever on this massive 5-page interview that's straight text. Let's keep moving. Aidan, you teased it. Page 16 in the Internet Archive. Think of this: U.S. Saturn to launch on September 2.
This was the thing. As you told me we were doing this issue, I was flipping through it. I was like, this is the thing I want to talk about. So we're looking at the May 1995 issue of Next Gen magazine. There's a big feature on how the U.S. Saturn will launch on September 2nd, 1995. Ty, what else happened in May of 1995? The U.S. Saturn launched in May 1995. So as this issue was hitting newsstands with a gigantic feature about its September launch, the Sega Saturn was hitting store shelves. Incredible.
Toys R Us
just
is
absolutely
when
incredible.
I saw this magazine and picked it up, probably the Toys R Us by me within a week or two of me reading it had Sega Saturns for sale, and I had no idea.
100%. And nobody knew, right? And the fact that they were like, this is so okay. The title here, the head is U.S. Saturn launch on September 2nd. The subhead: Sega of America announces Saturn Day and throws down the gauntlet to Sony and Nintendo. So they were aiming at a September launch far enough in advance that they gave a big feature interview with Sega of America president Tom Kalinske. I can't read that; it's too small. And they gave a big interview with the president of Sega of America, and then launched. And the fact that would happen, that there'd be an interview about a September launch in a May issue of a magazine, and the console would launch in May, just speaks to how reactionary and fast that decision must have been made. That interview probably happened so this May, it probably came out in April, so maybe you're looking at January, February for that interview to have occurred. So they were looking at that September launch, and somewhere in between, they decided to just go for it. I can't even figure out the manufacturing pipeline that allowed them to jump the queue like that. But whatever they did, this interview starts off with Sega. U.S. gamers will get their hands on the Sega Saturn on September 2nd, 1995. Sega of America has revealed, priced quote unquote between $350 and $450. Saturn will be nationally available with 20 titles available on the store shelves. So the month that it released, they still didn't have a price that they were willing to communicate out to magazines. Just incredible stuff, and incredible hindsight at how disorganized that Saturn launch was.
Absolutely wild. Also, a free little bit as we skim past here. Not a pull quote because it's not a quote, but with the cost of CD manufacture less than $2, the Sega is in the unique position of being able to include 2, 3, or even 4 games at $70 retail value in the box with Saturn hardware. What? They did not do that. That's not what happened.
No. How do you even get boxes manufactured fast enough to turn around a September, a May launch when you're aiming for September? Let alone getting games and stuff. They definitely didn't have 20 games available when it launched. So they just seem positioned, and lower down, they just seem well positioned for September, and they maybe could have built off that. But the May launch was just such a nightmare. But you see a little bit of a hint of maybe why they decided to do it later on in the second paragraph, or the second section in the interview. It says, and while Sega remains skeptical of Sony's ability to launch at $249, confidence of Sony's ability to make it happen is growing in the gaming industry. And this is quote, we have pretty good information as to what it costs to make each PlayStation, and I'd be very surprised if they made it, argues Tim Dunley, Sega's marketing manager. Meanwhile, Nintendo is sticking to its quote-unquote below $250 story for Ultra 64. So will Saturn find itself fatally overpriced? You can see that like Sega didn't want to lose money. You know, they weren't willing to aggressively sort of put, an aggressively costed console on the market. Maybe they didn't have the cash for it, but you could see that they were getting nervous about that price point, and they felt like their only option was to get out first.
Yeah.
And hope that people were so desperate for that next generation that they would get in. And it goes back to like Race's point about market penetration. Sega was banking on the idea that if they could get out early, they could get so many Saturns on the market that the momentum would just build from there, and it just never really happened. Like 450 for a Saturn just was never going to work. And then putting it out early without any marketing and stuff was just like such a nightmare.
Brutal. I want to move on. Can you go to page 24 here? Parallel technology enters VR arcades. And this is like so 1995. There's this big splashy, rendered 3D, it's like a deep sea submersible with like a lava ocean floor, and there's some gigantic looking eel thing in the background with big teeth. Spyfish, Tau Systems' first foray into the arcades. The finished game will shift over 1 million polygons per second in real time. It's big, long, super technical article about Tau Systems and their Tau operating system, and RISC and CISC and Glint and a bunch of super technical stuff, and shows off this motherboard. It takes a Pentium motherboard with 4 PCI slots, and then basically they have 4 daughter boards, like video cards, basically, with power PC chips and a Glint processor. And basically they're saying, hey, our code, our Taos operating system can run on any processor. So we basically have a cheap but high-end PC motherboard, and then we're going to put power PC chips in there, like Mac chips in there, and it'll be able to run on both, and we'll have massively 4-way parallel graphics and have all this da 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 da. So Aidan, this fascinated me as a kid. All this talk, this is all new to me. This kind of level of hardware depth was not gotten into very much in, like your EGMs and your Game Pros and Game Fans, right? And then interviews with these creators, it felt like so cutting edge and so like, wow, like these are the movies. Go to page 26, 27. Look at these sea monsters, Aidan. Look at this stuff.
It's spooky, man.
Yeah, for those of the video, this looks like Spore. Like, these look like Spore monsters, both in terms of design and in terms of graphical quality, right?
It kind of looks like, like when they'll get kids to draw like a deep sea animal, and then a 3D modeler will model that drawing. That's what these look like. They're like hilarious. There's like it's like an angler fish with like bright neon green fins, and then just like a bunch of spike teeth, like sticking straight out, like horizontally from its mouth. It's like it's so good.
Truly. But again, this worked on me, a little bit. I was 13, 14, 15. Going, wow, like just the detail. I mean, this looks like what even was beyond pre-rendered stuff at this time, right? Stuff where you're getting FMV of pre-rendered things in, PlayStation. Obviously, I didn't have a PlayStation yet; it wasn't out yet. But like, this looked so much better, and the idea that it's going to be in the arcades. Aidan, this was all vaporware. This did not exist. This whole exact article, in fact, read basically exactly as is in Edge the year before. I scoured the internet. The only references to this or this company or this technology that are not just references to these two magazines are, one, a white paper written in like 1992 about their like Unix-based operating system that could run on any processor. And then also the city of San Francisco's paperwork acknowledging the dissolution of the company in 1999.
Yeah, I mean, the grift has always been there, right? Like, you've always had people touting their technology and how it's going to change things, and they need a bunch of money, and a few people make a bunch of money, and then it disappears.
Oh, and VR. VR.
And
that's the
VR,
other thing.
like that's
supposed to be a VR headset in an arcade for all the VR-cades that are definitely going to be popping up.
100%. They kind of exist now. I see them around, but I don't know if they're any good. Those VR arcades where you sit in a super grimy, like, orb with a VR headset, and you probably get hand, foot, and mouth disease like, immediately. But like, I was like, I don't know, I was not in on 3D graphics when it all first started cropping up. Like, I wasn't impressed with stuff like Star Fox on the Super Nintendo. I liked Super Mario 64, but that was also like Mario and a new way of approaching Mario. And so, like, I was never really like on board with that. Like, oh, 3D technology is like the future and we're ready. Like, it never really felt like we were ready to leave really beautiful 2D video games behind. So stuff like this, I looked at it and, you know, I didn't ever think that those silly sea animals looked good. It never really excited me.
You
and
were
maybe I was just
way
ahead of the
me,
curve,
man.
or maybe I was behind the curve and still just sort of like a little bit younger and just wanted something that felt a little more cartoony or something. But like that hyper realistic idea of like early 3D tech was just, it never impressed me at the time. And I'll be honest, I think we've only gotten to the point now where we're in a place where like 3D gaming technology can create the level of like graphical fidelity and detail that matches up with like what pre-rendered backgrounds we're doing on the PlayStation. You know, like where we can support enough detail that it makes my brain feel like I'm in that world the same way that like Final Fantasy VII backgrounds did. This stuff, even in a VR headset, was never really going to make me feel like I was in the deep sea. It was going to make me feel like I was in a weird rendering of like, you know, a deep sea aquarium ride or whatever.
It looked like it was gonna make me strap Sequest DSV, the TV show, to my head. I was completely into it.
How are your you know, AI investments doing, Ty?
Oh man. Okay, believe it or not, we're gonna get there. Jump ahead, page 27. I had to do this. Joyriding by Bernard Yee. Dude, this is so great. I love this so much. Gaming updates from cyberspace. Aidan, this is a monthly column about how gaming is happening on the internet, and you should check it out. Aidan, can you please just try to read this?
Hell yeah. Okay, this is my kind. If I did not like 3D technology in 1995, I really liked internet, like online message boards and stuff. This is my kind of shit. Okay, here we go. The World Wide Web is another part of the internet which provides a more graphic environment for users with hypertext links to related subject. Click on a highlighted phrase to get entries on that subject.
Ooh.
The locations for websites are a bit arcane, since the backbone of the internet is Unix, an operating system. Navigating the net may be a bit intimidating for users without a good navigator. There are several websites devoted almost entirely to computer gaming. Here are a few to check. For Doom fans, you shouldn't miss http://www.cs.hmc.edu/people/docs/doom. So I guess this is like TJ's, like, you know, a direct socket connection to TJ's docs folder with all his Doom notes. If you're looking for game hints, check out wcl-rs.bham.ac.uk//walkthrough
We are joyriding. Woo!
Oh yeah, here we go.
If you are
this
looking
is the
for
good
game
stuff.
hints, check out this college kid in Birmingham, England's personal share of their computer, their servers, walkthrough.html. That is the place to go.
That's it, man. That was living, and that's what's, you know, like, in 1995 there was nothing better you could do with your time than check out TJ's Doom docs.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's more. We gotta move on. But the FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. FTP game cheats from this site and use this path, and you go to a FAQ on computer games is available at this FTP. It's like it's so funny. And what's Bernard Yee up to just today, just this year? After 8 years at Oculus and Meta, Bernard Yee left to co-found Wind Up Minds, a VR startup.
There we go. It's the future.
Uh-huh.
Who wants to live in this world when we can live in, you know, a digital world?
Tomorrow is always 6 to 18 months away.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Just give us more money. Well, we promise.
We've got to get to the cover story. 10 pages on Ultra 64. The story so far. We are here. Stick with us. If you're not paying for ad-free episodes, we will be back right here on Fun Factor. All right, we are back at Fun Factor. Two old gamers review old video game magazine reviews. I cannot wait to get into Ultra 64, the story so far. There's a huge, beautiful pre-rendered Silicon Graphics spaceship. It's kind of like a frisbee meets fighter jet kind of looking thing with like a plasma trail behind it. And this is just so SGI. I don't know where this comes from. I couldn't find a credit. I don't know if it's original for next gen, or if they're sourcing this from somewhere. I have no idea. But what this feature is a 10-page meticulous Pepe Sylvia style reconstruction of the timeline of N64 development from the 1993 Nintendo Silicon Graphics dual announcement of Project Reality to all the hardware and software acquisitions and partnerships, like with Rare. Each news item in this layout here is followed by the official line, which is quotes from the people involved, and the next gen's take is called the bottom line. Just for a taste here, Aidan, mind reading this bit?
Rare Limited, the development arm of Rare Coin-It Toys and Games Inc., signs an exclusive development deal with Nintendo to create Killer Instinct, the first in a series of video games for Project Reality. Official line. Rare has been working with Nintendo and Project Reality for some time. Howard Lincoln, Chairman, NOA. Bottom line? Who? Was pretty much the unanimous response of both game players and the gaming industry alike. Rare, famous only for the Battletoads series on NES games, seemingly came out of nowhere to sit at the right hand of the most powerful partnership in gaming. In fact, Rare's involvement in gaming dates back 20 years, having made its most significant mark in 1985 as the first NES developer outside of Japan. It was still a surprising choice, nevertheless.
Who?
What a wild quote. Like, Rare's been around for a long time, and like, Battletoads was like, I don't know, Battletoads was pretty big. When I was a kid renting an NES and stuff. Like, it wasn't like a random little, like, know-nothing game. What a strange quote.
It's
what a strange
very
take.
weird. I also think later in the feature they refer to Rare as the producers of Donkey Kong Country. So like, what are we doing
here? Well, yeah, of course. Donkey Kong Country would have been out at this point. Like, this is so strange. Huh. And like introducing them as like the development arm of Rare Coin-It Toys and Games, like post Donkey Kong Country. Like by 1995, like we probably would have had Diddy's Conquest.
Yeah. And it's funny because
stuff.
I do remember playing NES games, and I think even in Donkey Kong Country it still had, like trademark to Rare, and they did like Rare Coin-It. And I remember seeing that being like, what is Rare Coin-It? Like, I do remember that entity existing. But this is bizarre. But that aside, I was beyond excited for the potential of the system, not just as a Nintendo fan, but as a budding geek who was seeing Silicon Graphics machines both depicted in and the power behind like every geeky movie, TV show, project. What do you remember about the idea of Silicon Graphics teaming up with Nintendo?
I mean, as much as I was dogging on 3D graphics 5 minutes ago,
yeah,
the 3D rendering of the Final Fantasy VI characters as like a tech demo for the Ultra 64 and the Nintendo 64 was like,
we'll get to that,
everything to me. So like that to me, when I think back to this period and this announcement, like that was it, was like that tech demo of Final Fantasy VI. And that got me excited. Like, did I think it looked as good as the Super Nintendo version? No, but it still seemed pretty impressive. And maybe the familiarity helped with that.
For sure. And it's so funny as we go through these because these announcements end up including a lot of things that were exactly as advertised. From a like, whoa, extra amazing port of Doom. Though, of course, by the time it came out, a port of Doom was like the least amazing thing imaginable. And then also a lot of things that never came to pass. But for callback reasons, I wanted to highlight Spectrum Holobyte announcing a Top Gun game, which, according to Unseen64.net, was spiked and moved to PlayStation with snarky comments about the the N64's viability after Steve Race left Sony to take over Spectrum Holobyte.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's fun. I like that.
Yeah.
That's
Top Gun Fire at Will, PC and PlayStation in 96 after being announced and developed as a N64 exclusive. Another one here, there's an announcement of an N64 exclusive remake of Sierra Online's Red Baron, which was a PC PvP air combat game. As Next Gen says, this felt like another big sign that N64 was going to go big on online play. And the game never came out, and N64 never came online. If you jump ahead to page 45 here, you will see N64, or whatever it's called. Yeah, Ultra 64 hardware features featuring screenshots of a CES demo of emulated N64 hardware. I think every magazine got these same screenshots. And I looked at them and obsessed over them in every magazine anyway. I just, oh man, they're so tantalizing to me. But here, these explanations of these features are just like wrong. Quote, hard to see here, but without anti-aliasing, images flicker as they approach. Like, what? That's not what anti-aliasing does. What?
No, and like the Nintendo 64 is like famous for being blurry,
right?
As like a counter to like real anti-aliasing. Like they just kind of blur everything. That's what a strange.
Yeah.
Strange comment.
It's easy to forgive. They called it load management, LOAD management. It's actually LOD, level of detail management. It's effectively the same thing. It's managing it manages pop in, basically.
Load management, that's where you don't play your best games, right? All the time. You kind of like put them on the on the bench.
Woo! Basketball jokes. LeBron's taking a breather. Sorry, everyone. Next level. Mario comeback next level. Don't want to get an injury. Yeah. But the last thing I really wanted to highlight, if we go to page 47 here, this unsubstantiated rumors section, which just everything about this aches of like legacy print journalism. I've copied it out for you, Aidan, because this is almost unreadable black and red text on red. So just read through all of these things and we'll deal with them afterwards.
I need to paint a picture here. This is a big red box, sort of like a blood red color. The main copy is like kind of the color of dried blood.
Yes.
And then they've highlighted random words, their names of companies or Steven Spielberg. And they're kind of the color of like, I don't know, light blood.
Yeah.
And it's you're meant to be able to read this somehow. But in any case, I'll read Ty's copy here in our outline. Rocket Science is working with Silicon Studios, the content creation arm of SGI, to produce a game for the Ultra 64. It's false-ish. Rocket Science was a buzzy company that raised a bunch of money, shipped 2 flops, and disappeared. Silicon Studio was spun off of SGI in 2000 and made games for many platforms, but never the Nintendo 64. Is that Silicon Knights, right? Like they're not the Eternal Darkness guys? This is a different studio?
This is what I put down because it's Silicon Studio, and it looks like it operated internally and then became its own company with a former VP of SGI at the head of it. And they made a lot of, tools and utilities too. It wasn't just games. So this is like Silicon Graphics' content arm. Maybe they worked with Rocket Science. Maybe they didn't. Rocket Science,
interesting.
Imploded like 90 days after, like the CEO has this. There's this big story in Wired, and then another big story in Wired like years later going, oh yeah, this is this company I raised a ton of money for and it blew up because we didn't make any games. So I have no idea if they worked with Silicon Studios. Silicon Studios probably best known for making Bravely Default and apparently is involved in the Bravely Default remake. But they made like
the same one
and 3DS games, but never N64.
Huh. All right. Next rumor: THQ's Akira project has been scrapped on the SNES and will appear on the Ultra 64. Our verdict: true-ish. It would never come out for the Nintendo 64 either.
Yeah, THQ was just grabbing every license it could at this point and announced a bunch of games. And there's a very funny article where their developer is like, this guy was going out and buying all these licenses and being like, make a game on this, make a game on this.
This is the anime Akira?
Yes,
like,
yes.
Tetsuya?
So he apparently was a huge Akira fan and spent years and years trying to adapt Akira through multiple different companies. And then got hooked up with THQ. Sweet. Yeah.
But it's kind of one of those things that can't really be adapted. Like, it's just... Like, can you imagine a Nintendo 64 version of Akira? It would be wild. Next rumor... this is what I was kind of talking about earlier. Squaresoft, one of Nintendo's oldest allies, is working on an Ultra 64 version of Final Fantasy VII. Our verdict: true-ish. Square put together the famous 1995 Final Fantasy VI tech demo on SGI hardware, which was never meant to be a full game.
No.
But it looked cool, and so you had Shadow and Celes and Locke fighting against a golem. And if I remember correctly, it was using the analog stick. You would draw shapes to do different moves. So you would draw like a star to do magic, which is kind of neat. And early development of Final Fantasy VII was for Nintendo. It actually was a Super Nintendo game at one point. Yes. Set in New York City with Hot-Blooded Joe. And went on to sort of become, you can see remnants of it in the real Final Fantasy VII's Midgar, but also Parasite Eve. But the decision by Nintendo to stick with cartridges pushed Square to Sony, and that's obviously well-known history at that point. Next rumor, Acclaim.
Aidan, I wanted to jump in real quick. You did mention it. I had not seen the whole video. It's out there on YouTube. SIGGRAPH is like a Japanese computer conference from the 90s, and they put together this thing, and I watched the whole thing. I had never seen it. It's really, really amazing in a lot of ways, but there were like 2 screenshots of that thing that circulated around, and I was so obsessed with it. And then I can't decide if it's Terra or Celes because it's blonde, and not like the green hair. It looks kind of more like Celes, but then it's got all this red, and actually the camera goes like right up her butt at one point, and she's got like a thong on. And again, we're talking about like N64, so this is like 17 polygons and shading and use your imagination. It's very weird, but the potential of it was so agonizing for me as a Squaresoft fan and a Nintendo fan.
Absolutely. And it just kind of spoke to, like, you know, the progression of games and wanting to see more tech. You know, and you look back at it now and it's so rudimentary, and like it, you know, it never would have been suitable technology for the Final Fantasy series. Like what Sakaguchi was able to do on the PlayStation with the pre-rendered backgrounds, these cinematics and all that, never could have happened on the Nintendo 64. And if you had had a 3D version of Final Fantasy VII, like, you know, think about 3D RPGs on a Nintendo 64, like Quest 64. Like if you were in that realm, like Final Fantasy never would have taken off. Japanese RPGs probably just never would have taken off in the West. And like, where would we be at this point? But it was pretty cool looking at the time.
Let's go
next
quick
rumor.
through the next like 8.
Yeah,
because they're all
there's a ton?
true.
Oh my gosh, we haven't even got to the okay. So here's a bunch of true rumors that actually that came true. Acclaim is not only producing Turok but also Batman Forever and Alien Trilogy for Ultra 64. Interplay signed the rights to produce the game of Steven Spielberg's Casper and is keeping the project on ice until it's possible to release the title on Ultra 64. Rare, the producers of Donkey Kong Country, who maybe you've heard of, a little nobody.
Oh, the Battletoads guys?
You know, the Battletoads guys.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, a little editorializing there. Is currently working on 6 new Ultra 64 games.
I didn't count them. I'm pretty sure that's true.
Banjo-Kazooie.
Banjo-Tooie.
Racing.
I mean, Killer Instinct 2.
Killer
I mean,
Instinct.
I'm sure they got to 6 at some point.
Yeah, I mean, Viva Pinata was probably in there. It didn't come out for it came out way later, but I'm sure it's Rare. It was probably in there. Donkey Kong 64. I can think of lots of Rare
Yes.
Nintendo 64 games. Both Capcom and Konami are producing Ultra 64 games, but refuse to either confirm this or comment as to what the titles may be. We know one of those is Ultra 64's Castlevania title.
Yes.
So they made a Castlevania.
Capcom didn't do much, but they made Resident Evil 2, and there's a Mega Man 2000 or
Resident
something.
Evil 2 on the Ultra 64 is honestly one of the most impressive releases like ever.
And in
Squeezing
fact,
that onto a cart.
It ties back one of the
wild.
announcements here, Angel Studios, because they're the Lawnmower Man people. So there was an announcement, hey, the graphics house that made the Lawnmower Man is going to work on an N64 game. They announced that, and people went, wow, okay, but like if they're just a pre-rendered like graphics company, like a visual effects house, what kind of game are they going to make? And then Capcom tapped them to make RE2. And it was like, what?
Technically impressive. Like really impressive stuff getting that onto a cart. An Ultra 64 Mario game is in development, but is awaiting the attention of Shigeru Miyamoto, who is currently busy on other projects.
That is true. As they put in this feature, he worked heavily on the Pilotwing 64. So I don't know at this exact instant in time what Shigeru Miyamoto's schedule is, but Mario, Super Mario World did get his attention very heavily, and he did work on other stuff. So that all seems to add up.
And finally, the last confirmed true rumor. It says, and finally, expect the joypads to offer some surprises. Which it did. It was wild. Like the three-prong thing still confuses my kids. They have no idea how to hold a Nintendo 64 controller.
This is all funny to me. I want you to read the one about the Virtual Boy, though.
So this one. Rumor. The Virtual Boy may be adaptable for use with the Nintendo 64. Don't ask how or why.
How? Why?
That one surprisingly turned out to be false. And that kind of seems like the one where the people had, like, how long is this? Is it like, like an 8-inch column or whatever? They probably had like, an inch and a half they had to fill. So they actually they didn't even fill it. There's just a bunch of blank space at the end. So like you can feel the places where they probably just made up some rumors. I know for a fact that Sushi X, like all the rumors in EGM and stuff, like half the time they were just made up because they needed to fill space. And I think you can feel where maybe that's happening here.
Yeah. This reminds me, again, sports journalism, brief story. Back in 2008, the sports, like, bloggers versus mainstream media thing was, like, so huge. And a lot of the old school people just did not understand how blogging worked. And so there's a guy, Rob Parker, who's, nationally somewhat known, been on ESPN a bunch. And, he was getting all mad at sports bloggers. So he started this section of his column he wrote for one of the Detroit papers at the time, Rumors and Lies or whatever, and just like mixed rumors in with just making stuff up. And he put in there that Kirk Cousins, the good boy quarterback of the Michigan State football team at that time, who went on to a very long and pretty successful NFL career, had gotten in a fight with a bunch of members of the hockey team, which makes absolutely no sense. And then, of course, it became a huge story, and they had to address it, and there was saber rattling about libel. And it's just like, if you're a print journalism outlet, just printing rumors like this just makes no sense, because either you know something and you can put it in print, or you don't and you can't. And putting even in this huge red box that's like, this is all rumors, any of it may or may not be true, you still, just even throwing it out there has this weight behind it that to me is just so hard to navigate.
Yeah, you have to be careful. But video game journalism, games media in the 90s was like fueled by rumors, right? So many of my predominant memories are reviving Aerith or unlocking Shenlong or all the console rumors that we're talking about today. And there's maybe a little less liability there when you're just talking about rumored console specs and not this happened to some specific person.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's just a tricky spot for me. Oh my gosh, we could do 3 episodes on this issue, I'm sure. If you want to jump ahead to page 60, we're going to get through the previews pretty quickly, but there are some ones we just can't skip. Daytona USA. This is a preview of the conversion for it. Skip one more page, I think 62. Aidan, can you read the pull quote here?
Yeah. This is my, this is my wheelhouse. This is CRT resolutions.
Oh,
We've got, due to technical limitations, AM2 has been forced to produce the Saturn version using the machine's lower screen resolution of 320 by 224.
Oof.
Well, the rest of you are out there enjoying your 4K TVs. 224 lines of vertical resolution. Doesn't get better than that.
Brutal. We skip ahead a little bit more past interesting Prisoner of Ice, PC adventure game based on H.P. Lovecraft's story. This actually looks sick. I don't remember this preview at all, which is weird because this is one of the ones I would have looked at and go, oh man, I wish I had a gaming PC. The story mirrors actual events when possible and is based in part on the actions of the Ahernebe, a Nazi organization created during 1935 in order to study the occult. Whoo boy. Lots to unpack about H.P. Lovecraft's story about the Nazi occultists. But we go out, you Panzer Dragoon. This made me want a Saturn more than any other game. More than all the other games combined. Just looking at these graphics and thinking about a rail shooter with speed and beauty like this. There's 3-4 pages full of just absolutely gorgeous screenshots. On page 76 we get Jumping Flash. I didn't pull out the pull quote here, but Aidan, Jumping Flash looks like an idiosyncratic combination of Motor Tune Grand Prix and Pilot Wings. What the heck?
That's actually a pretty good summary of Jumping Flash. I kind of like that. Not that that's gonna sell a lot of people on the game, but that's pretty interesting, I think. Jumping Flash is a cool game. I cannot even imagine what the sort of pitch meeting for that would be. You're in a bunny, a mechanical bunny, and you can jump really high. It was clearly designed to show off just big 3D worlds and verticality. But it's just such a funny
technically an FPS.
But it was fun.
Somehow also, by the way.
I guess so. Yeah. Yeah, that's not what I remember it for.
If you want to go to page 78, Secret of Evermore. This one stupid spaceship got me so horny for video games. It's this so imaginative, so vivid. The red, the little vent pipes, carbon looking pipes coming off the back. It's got a V6 in there, even though it's rocket engines. The big chrome grill with the handlebars, but it's this cat. Looks kind of like SWAT cat to the Radical Squadron over the Earth, but a moony Earth over the starfield. It's just this gorgeous, again, Silicon graphics. It's everywhere right now. And being a US developed, and then this octopus pipe thing on the next page, seeing this just made me absolutely astonished by what it looked like in the pre-renders, what it looked like in the game. I wanted this so badly, and the idea, hey, they're developing it in the US. It's not going to be a Japan only exclusive. This weird little bipedal firebomb monster that drinks gasoline. I mean, it looked just absolutely astounding. Aidan, there's a great thing to follow up with this is I never saw this in stores. I never bought this. It wasn't available. I could never see it. I don't think today I've even seen a copy of Secret of Evermore.
Well, come over to my house.
I might.
I've got a copy.
I will someday.
Yeah. But I did not have a copy as a kid. I rented it a lot. My grocery store rented video games, and I remember renting Secret of Evermore quite a bit, but never really being able to get too deep into it because of that. It's interesting. It's kind of a funky take on Secret of Mana. Did some interesting things with alchemy, where you mix collectibles, resources for spells and stuff. It's not great, but it tried something new, which I like. It kind of plays with real world history and settings in a way that something like Terra Enigma might have. But it's one of those sort of Squaresoft RPGs that, wasn't really quite as popular as some of their others. What's interesting in the way it ties into next gen is they used SGI rendering techniques to create a lot of the designs, which are then sort of digitized into pixel art that would fit on a 240p display. And so you got like some really big, interesting looking sprites that were maybe a little more unique than what you might see even in other Squaresoft games. Some of it holds up better than others at this point, but it's pretty neat. It was all based, like all the levels were based on different like movie stereotypes as well, which was kind of fun. So there was that Americana aspect of it that might have appealed to some Western players a bit. At least it felt unique in this style of game.
Page 86, obligatory, have to mention it. Chrono Trigger.
That's it. That's the stuff.
Absolutely.
You got the courthouse
chief
scene.
Designer Hori Yuji.
Hori Yuji.
Yeah. Okay. I would be like, oh, maybe they're trying to do the like honor the like, except they misspelled it. I'm pretty sure. And then also you get Iranobu Sakaguchi with no H in front, like I. And not reversed family name first name. So who even knows what's happening?
And these were like names that showed up in the credits for Chrono Trigger spelled. So like you had somebody who was maybe doing translations on their own. I'd have to go look at their names in Japanese, but yeah, that's not great. I remember actually, like, when you and I, this is like inside baseball type stuff, but one of the things, like, when you and I first started kind of connecting and I was showing you some of my games journalism for feedback, I think I spelled Yuji Hori's name wrong. It might even have been in a draft for Fight Magic items. And, and then I can't remember how I spelled it, but it was a typo. And you're like, if there's one thing you do, it's get people's names spelled right. Like, do not misspell people's names. And that always stuck with me. So seeing it here, two of the names misspelled is interesting. Whether that's a mistranslation, whether that's somebody who wasn't quite paying attention. The fact that they reversed the surname and the given name tells me that they were probably trying, putting effort in and maybe translating these themselves. And that's why it's a little bit different than what we usually see.
Yeah. And it's, as we've talked about before, these, zero typos was not the goal. These are not shelf books designed to stay in libraries forever. They were designed to be read and forgotten about. But even so, that one still stands out to me today because immediately credibility takes a huge hit. It looks like you don't know what you're talking about, and it looks like you're not trying to honor your subjects, even in what appears to be an explicit attempt to honor your subject. But we've got to get to the main event. Again, subscribe to FunFactor ULTRA. You get ad-free episodes. We skip right through. We come right back. In the meantime, hang on. We will review Next Generation's review of Kirby's Dream Course. Stick around. We'll get to it right here on Fun Factor. All right, we are back. We are having 5 stars of fun worth today, aren't we, Aidan?
10 stars.
Yeah.
Of fun, I think. There's 10 stars worth of content in this magazine, at least.
Oh, yeah. And folks, if you are getting 5 stars of fun worth out of this, go ahead and tell Apple Podcasts, leave a rating and a review. We will read the best, funniest, kindest, and most entertaining ones on the air. But now, it is time. Next Generation's review format. Aidan, we've talked about this before, is my favorite review format of all time. I thought this is a brilliant way to do it. Right on the heels of, some of these, we've talked about, game players using like a 6 category weighted average. We've seen, Game Pro doing 4 different panelists all getting their own out of 10 score. All these various versions, right? This is a 5-star rating. 1 through 5, no halves, and then they say what the metric is. So, 5 stars, revolutionary, brilliantly conceived and flawlessly executed, a new high watermark. 4 stars, excellent, a high quality and inventive new game, either a step forward for an existing genre or a successful attempt at creating a new one. 3 stars, good, a solid and competitive example of an established game style. 2 stars, average, perhaps competent, certainly uninspired. And then 1 star, bad, crucially flawed in design or application. And Aidan, again, I think if they could stick to this and avoid the grade inflation, if Amazon stuff was rated like this, if all the 5-star ratings in our lives worked like this, where it's basically 1 to 4, and then we keep 5 for like the cream of the crop, I think things would be a lot better. But I think for reasons we've talked about, it doesn't end up staying this way.
No, and I'm looking through like every review in this issue, and there's quite a few of them. There are no 5 stars. Like, there are some good games in here. Heretic is in here. The game we're going to review later is in here. It's a good one. Earthworm Jim is good. Kirby's Avalanche, Metal Warriors. Like, there are some good games in here, but there are no 5s. There's a few 4s. And that is, you know, like, if you're using the scale, you don't want to rate on that bell curve, right? You don't want to make sure you're dropping a couple of 5s every issue. Like, hang on to that until it's, you know, the game.
Yeah, and they also weren't too frequent with the 1 either. You didn't see a ton of 1s, which I'm actually surprised that this one didn't get a 1, because this is great. Before we actually get to Kirby's Dream Course, Aidan, can you read Fight for Life for the Atari Jaguar with a screenshot if you guys are watching on the visual version? It's so bad, man.
Atari's first entry into the next generation fighting game arena displays some great features new to the Punch-Out world, as well as some of the worst execution and gameplay we've seen yet. 8 fighters, polygon modeled and armed with a scattering of special moves, compete in various netherworldly arenas in the Virtua Fighter Toshinden ring-out tradition. Movement is just silly. Characters shuffle around the ring with all of the grace and poise of an injured hunchback. Despite the innovative idea of awarding characters with special moves after each round, the ending gameplay is almost completely unplayable no matter how many tricks you learn. Although the game is a step in the right direction, the horrible fighting movements are reminiscent of Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
Damn.
Which leaves Fight for Life unable to even compare to the excellent titles currently available. If you own a Jaguar and you're looking for a fighting title, you'll need to keep waiting. Rating? 2 stars. 2 stars. I cannot really think of a stronger 1-star review, because like, so going back to like, you know, the very objective definitions of 2-star, average, perhaps competent, certainly uninspired. Now, Fight for Life sounds uninspired. It does not sound average or competent. No. Based on the text there. That's wild.
It sounds crucially flawed in design and application.
And then right above it, you have a review for Tempo, which is a platformer for the 32X. And Tempo wasn't excellent, but it was pretty. Like, it had big, you know, like colorful worlds and sprite art that looked okay. Like, that's one that, like, even if the platforming is not good, even if, like, you know, the level design's bad or whatever, at least it has a defining feature that looks attractive or is interesting, like it's visual design. Whereas Fight for Life doesn't sound like it has any of that. But maybe when you're on the Jaguar, maybe it's a 2 for a Jaguar game, because the average Jaguar game was that was a low bar.
If you own a Jaguar and you're looking for a fighting title, you'll need to keep waiting. Like, the cavalry is not coming. No. If you own a Jaguar, this is your fighting title. You know, like, I don't even. So, I don't know. That's weird to me. Okay, now actually the review we actually need to review. One of the things about these next generation ratings is they put so much into the features and into the previews and commentary and all that other stuff. These reviews are pretty punchy. They're pretty concise, and especially the ones that are average or, you know, not bad and bad, but not in a fun way. We just kind of, you know, breeze past them. They're usually 150 to 350 words. And here's one. Sweet. Kirby's Dream Course. They pull out some of the highlight, like either best and worst, and give them like this 1-word slug along with the screenshot. So page 104. Let's just go ahead and read the whole thing if you don't mind, Aidan.
All right. Kirby's Dream Course is too cute for its own good, but this game is still surprisingly unique and fascinating. You play as Kirby, that lovable little puff who's already had 3 games to himself. Kirby can launch himself in the air or roll along the ground with the idea of bumping into little monsters and turning them into stars. After the last one remaining... Sorry, I peeked a little bit there. After the last one remaining digs a hole, you aim for it to reach the next tee. It's sort of like miniature golf, but each area is littered with strange obstacles, like fans, conveyor belts, warp tiles, ice, and spikes, and each of the 8 courses becomes progressively tougher. Plus, Kirby can add backspin or rotation and move in something other than a straight line. Not to mention the special powers he can acquire, like turning into a tornado. Suddenly, you're playing a game that's a lot more complex than the superficial Candyland exterior would lead you to believe. If you can keep from choking on the saccharine... How do you... Saccharin?
Saccharin. Yeah, that should have an
That's
E.
spelled wrong, right? In the review. Yeah, that's not... You spelled it... It's spelled wrong in the actual review. Yeah,
okay. It's spelled wrong in the review.
I was like, I don't think saccharine.
Yeah, saccharin is how I've always heard it pronounced.
This will be a good outtake. If you can keep from choking on the saccharine, this game's is so... No, that's also in there.
No,
oh
that's
my gosh.
in it as well. This game's is so unique. That's in the review as well.
If you can... I'm going to read this review straight. I'm not going to edit for them. If you can keep from choking on this saccharine, this game's is so unique, it rates at 4 stars just for being unlike anything we've seen. Rating 4 stars.
4 stars. Okay, so before we get into reviewing the review, Aidan, what is your history with Kirby games?
I didn't play a lot of them back in the day. I was most familiar with the first one on Game Boy, which I liked but never owned.
Right.
But I was always sort of like curious about them and appreciated that they were there. I hate the it's too cute for its own good thing. That just like bleeds into the whole like Nintendo is for kids and games, like should be mature and all that kind of stuff that started cropping up around this time. I always really liked Kirby and it seemed appealing. I loved its visual design. I really got into the series with the Nintendo DS and Canvas Curse. And that one I thought was really cool. I loved the fact that you drew it like in a rainbow color. So in that game, you used your stylus to move Kirby around the world. And when you drew it with the stylus, it would leave a line that was like a platform he could roll along. So you do loop-to-loops to get him to get up to speed and ramps to like get around. And it drew a rainbow and it looked cool. So that was like really appealing to me. But again, drawn to those bright colors. And Kirby's always been that. Dream Course, I think I rented once, did not understand it at all. But I really like going back to play it now. I think it's a really cool game and it's pretty impressive on the Super Nintendo to have like, I don't know if they're really physics or not, but like, it is a mini golf course. And so there are lots of like ramps and, bowls to go into and obstacles to get around. And it uses some sort of like, very basic physics to emulate all that, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, and I'm kind of similar because Kirby's Dream Land 1992, I did not have a Game Boy. I was actually I didn't travel much as a kid. Like my mom liked to stay in. We ran errands on Saturday or whatever, but my mom liked to stay in. I liked to stay in. And so I didn't have a Game Boy. I didn't play Kirby's Dream Land. I associated Kirby with the Game Boy. Kirby's Adventure for the NES came out in 93, 2 years after Super Nintendo was released. I think it came out probably the same summer I got a Super Nintendo. I was not hunting down NES titles in 1993 to play. Kirby's Pinball Land, also Game Boy also. Again, so for me, Kirby was like a Game Boy thing. Kirby's Dream Course, this review, I was like, yo, like 4 stars? And it's really cute and attractive. It's 3D in the like isometric, like Polygon-esque style, right? It looks like Marble Madness kind of. And I went, okay. And I rented it and I had a blast with this thing. I love Kirby's Dream Course. I rented it 2 or 3 times. I never bought it, but I got pretty far in it. And it's this weird mix of like pool and golf. So it had the like multi-point adjustment of like, and then like, add English, add spin, control your arc, so you're arcing around things and sometimes you're arcing and bouncing off something.
Bit of pinball in there too.
Spin, so it like scoots really fast. Yeah. Like it's pinball, it's golf, it's bouncing, it's pool. It teaches you really well. There's a lot of great conveyance in the design of the game where it's going, okay, do this. Ha! Now there's a thing in your way. What are you going to do? Oh, you can kind of bounce it. Oh, like now there's this tree. How do you curve around it? Right. So it's like, it gives you those tools and then it ramps up pretty quickly and these obstacles and it's puzzly in that way. Cause you're kind of like, all right, cool. I'm around this. I'm over that. And they have a little one shot here where you see there's 3 enemy trees, 2 pits of spikes, like 8 different tiles of conveyor belts that are forward and backward and running into each other, and a warp tile. And you're just sitting there going like, how nuts does this get? And it gets pretty nuts. And it's kind of like, what if Angry Birds had like, it's that same sort of thing of like, oh, trial and error, figuring out, getting further, getting to the end, and then being like, oh my god, that took me 8. Par is 3. How am I supposed to do that in 3 shots? And you want to go back and immediately replay it to get your, your 3 stars sort of a thing. And I think it was on Switch Online at some point a few years ago. And I went,
that's right.
oh yeah, Kirby's Dream Course. And I played it again. I had a blast with it.
It's one of the things I really like about Kirby is the way that it's never been afraid to experiment and put Kirby in new situations.
Yeah.
And like, he's a ball. He can do, and and he gets these power-ups. He can basically be anything that they need him to be. And I think Kirby's Dream Course was the first example of like, oh, Kirby can be more than a platformer, right? And the 3 platformers before that were really good. But they were, fairly traditional, fairly easy platforms. They were beautiful. One of the kind of interesting things about the NES and the Super NES ones, in my opinion, is they were both very late titles, like you said. But, as cutesy as they were, they're some of the like best looking games on those consoles. And people don't necessarily always recognize that because they're so cutesy. Certainly didn't at the time. But just putting Kirby into like interesting situations was really fun, I think. And I think it's also worth noting that with Dream Course, it was also directed by Kensuke Tanabe. And he worked on a ton of fantastic Nintendo games, including like he did map design on Kirby's Dream Course, but he was also a scenario writer on Link to the Past, Link's Awakening. He did course design and directed and did course design for Super Mario Brothers 2. He did course design for Super Mario Brothers 3. And he also went on to work on stuff like Ocarina of Time, a whole bunch, Eternal Darkness, apparently, Metroid Prime as a co-producer. So like, This was a guy in Nintendo that was and continues to have like, a hugely impressive resume. The list of games on his Wikipedia page is incredible. He's working on Metroid Prime 4, Beyond. He worked on the Metroid Prime Remaster. He was the creative director of Super Nintendo World, which is really interesting when you think about Kirby's Dream Course, because it feels almost like a theme park in that way, right? And so you have somebody people might not think of Tanabe when they think of Nintendo, but he's been involved in so many of their amazing games since the late 80s. So it's no surprise, in my opinion, that Kirby's Dream Course was weird, but also just well executed and good. And to review the review, I think the review really recognizes that. Sometimes what I talk about is reviews that will like be glowing and then they'll kind of try to get their criticism in at the end to show objectivity. This one sort of like launches with some negativity, like, oh, it's too cute for its own good. But I actually found a game here that's really surprising and interesting and fun. And I think that like is Kirby, right? Yeah. Like you look at it, you look at these screenshots, you're like, how do you even play that? Like, I don't really, like it's not intuitive when you look at it necessarily, but as soon as you get your hand on the controller, you're like, oh, whoa, like this is not what I expected it to be. There's so much more depth and challenge and, like ability to inspire the player to come back and beat their par courses and get further into the game. Pars on courses and get further into the game. So I think the review's pretty spot on with my experience with Kirby's Dream Course. And like you say, it also communicates that in a fairly punchy and tight, like, I don't know, 150, 200 words.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. 186 words. That's pretty tight, but it gives you everything that you really need to know. And like I said, it gave me the itch to go out and get it for myself, right? Like I was like, I want to rent this, and I rented it, and I had a great time. So I think, and you're absolutely right to call this out, and it's both to the review's credit and against it that they mention it repeatedly. It's too cute, it's for babies, it's saccharine, it's Candyland, blah, 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 blah. We're all very serious grown-ups who want to have a very serious time, and we want to see blood and guts and murder and sex. And, like, this is, like, cutesy. But, like, hey, first of all, it's Kirby. Second of all, this is legitimately cute. It's not shooting for cute. It's not marketing to babies.
Yes.
It's really adorable. It's very well done. The art is executed really, really well, and you play it, and there's so many little touches. Like the UI is cute. The levels are cute. You're like riding stars up to the next level. You know, you shoot away. You like when you get the last hole on a course, because like each level is like a series of holes, right? So I can't remember if it's 9. Like you play 9, and you go to the next world, and like you rocket star up, and it leaves like stars in its path. You know, it's just like so much. And so I think it's really, really successful. But even so, even with that bias against a game with this kind of packaging and presentation, they still give it 4 stars, as high as any game this month got. Heretic got 4 stars too, right? Like, and it goes with their thing, a successful attempt at creating a new one. This is unlike anything they've ever seen. It's surprisingly complex, and I just think they did a great job. So I'm gonna give this one 9 out of 10 star rods.
9 out of 10 star rods. I think 9 out of 10 star rods is pretty good. I can agree with that. Again, I don't like that they ding it for being cute, because that's what Kirby is, and video games have always been for everybody, and cute games exist. So I'll ding it a point for that, but I think 9 star rods out of 10.
All right, that is our review of Next Generation's review of Kirby's Dream Course. Did we get it right? Leave our review at Apple Podcasts, post it as a comment on YouTube, and we will read the best ones on air. And hey, go ahead and pass the show around to all your friends like it's 3rd grade and we're on the playground. Shout us out on Blue Sky at funfactorpod.com or anywhere else, YouTube, TikTok, wherever, at funfactorpod. But unlike these old magazines, you won't have to wait a whole month for your next installment. We are dropping new episodes every 2 weeks. So go to funfactorpod.com to follow our show on your podcatcher of choice, and please consider becoming a member of FunFactor ULTRA, our premium tiers that unlock ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, and the members-only channels of our community Discord. Just go to funfactorpod.com and you cannot miss it. If you become a member, you and we will have a maximum score in FunFactor.
For the outtakes, can I just point something out here? My favorite thing about this issue in this review section, though, is at the very bottom, just below the Kirby's Dream Course review. There's a box, a little sidebar with the title "Sorry" with big exclamation mark. No new games were made available for review this month on the following systems: Saturn, CDI, and Arcade. And if that just wasn't the most prescient little like sidebar there, like, you know. Of course there were no games made available for those. One of them wasn't even supposed to be out yet and was doomed to fail. And then the CDI was a CDI, and of course Arcade. I probably had another decade before it really started to die. But you know, the writing was on the wall, maybe, for some of those.
Have you ever watched the 95 the SIGGRAPH fantasy demo, Final Fantasy VI demo? Okay.
Yeah, I've seen the actual like the video footage. Yeah, I mean, back in the day, it was just the screenshots that I knew, but I've since
I had not seen it before, even though I like obsessed over it as a kid. Every time they ran those screenshots, I would just stare at it. Like, come on, give it to me, you know. And so to be able to see this for this,
just trying to get like sucked into that world. And
episode was like, oh my god, I cannot believe. And again, some of it was like really cool, and you know, some of the music and the animations, and it's like you can see where they ended up in Final Fantasy VII, right? Some of the like the wind up shot on the character, and the animation going, you know, and you're thinking, wow,
absolutely,
they're really, you can see how they're on the path to making Final Fantasy VII, and also, wow, this is nowhere close to where Final Fantasy VII ended up.
No. And you have to wonder if like the limitations of the technology at the time became evident to that team, and they said, hey, like, we've got some things we want to do, we just can't get there in real time on the Nintendo 64, but look at what we could do if we could pre-render all of these videos, put them on a CD, and you know, ship it that way, right? And so Nintendo 64 was impressive because it did impressive things in real time that the PlayStation wasn't really able to do, but sometimes that wasn't just good enough. Right, and for something like Final Fantasy VII, it just didn't really allow Sakaguchi, who, you know, had these dreams of being sort of a movie guy, you know, very cinematic. It was like, okay, I could make this leap, but I could make a bigger leap over on the other console. You can kind of see that in that tech demo.
I'm sorry. I was literally just scrolling. Email in from Brody McDonald. Oh, and they're printing these people's whole email addresses, by the way. bmcdona@bgnet.bgsu.edu. I think that's Bowling Green. Shout outs to the middle of nowhere, Ohio. I am outraged at your recent coverage of the Atari Jaguar in Next Generation #2. First, you gave the most space to the worst of the 3 games reviewed. And if that wasn't bad enough, you showed no pictures for Iron Soldier, the best of the... There was so much more space. It nauseated me. Your anti-Atari bias showed, and I am disgusted by it. Unless you can count me out as a purchaser of your magazine. I know of many other Jaguar owners who feel the same way, as I am in an owners club. Brody McDonald.
Was Brody McDonald a pseudonym for Nolan Bushnell? Is he taken over again? Here's another letter. This is fantastic. In issue 3 of Next Generation, page 67, Doom is rightfully honored as a landmark game. The paragraph from that issue describing the game, in part, reads, Doom spread throughout the PC world faster than any game previously, largely due to id Software's innovative shareware policy of distribution. We at Apogee are happy to accept your praise. It was Apogee who invented the trilogy method of marketing games as shareware back in 1987. id Software was brought into the world of shareware through Apogee, first Commander Keen, then Wolfenstein 3D, and the guys at id have done nothing with Doom that Apogee did not pioneer marketing-wise. Goes on like this for about 3 more paragraphs before it's signed off. Scott Miller, president, Apogee Software. Next Generation's response, we stand corrected. Yeah, man. Like, so we've got that interview with, the Sony guy earlier, and then we just had the president of Apogee writing in, like, slapping their hand, Like, this is the type of thing that would happen, via PR in the background, and, like, you'd have them threatening to pull ads or whatever, like, nowadays. But this was just like, Scott Miller sending out letters to the editor. Love it. And they printed it. Instead of, like, being like, oh, shoot, sorry, we'll offer a correction. Yeah. They instead just printed his whole letter.
That's outstanding.
In Next Generation. Yeah, what was probably Scott Miller. I mean, their whole thing, too, was like going around sort of traditional distribution methods and stuff like that, using the internet at the time to get their games out there. And so it doesn't surprise me that they would be the ones writing into magazines to be like, hey, that wasn't, the id guys who, like, helped, Apogee was doing some cool stuff, but, like, id's the one that really kind of made them rocket into the stratosphere. Thanks to Wolfenstein and Doom and stuff like that. But, to kind of also get in there and be like, hey, like, yeah, our partner,
right?
It's offered pretty cool guys, but... Jill of the Jungle was not, like, setting the world on fire.
Work.
Yeah. Nintendo of Japan is working on an Ultra 64 Castlevania title. Nintendo worked on that?
Oh.
Kona. That one's...
Sorry.
Does it say in there? That's false. That's false. Fact-checking the fact-checkers. Okay. Rare. Are we going to keep that in, or do you want me to read that again? This episode's getting very long. Do we need to, like, skip? Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, no, it says Nintendo of Japan is working on Ultra 64 Castlevania title. But now we need to determine whether they actually worked on it. Ty and Aidan. Mm-hmm. It was published it was developed by Konami and
Yeah.
published by Konami, so no Nintendo in there.
Yeah. Still.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want me to just re-record that then from the... Or I'm going through true ones, right? So after the Interplay Casper one,
Yeah,
I should just skip that one.
Go for it.
Okay.